the name of the panel is something to the degree of, Israel, an island of stability and economic crisis, which we'll dig into. We'll give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. We'll discuss this notion of stability and Israel being this bedrock of stability, this island of stability. Some interesting statistics and numbers that folks in this space are looking at. Hopefully everybody will be able to leave this room a little bit more educated and more knowledgeable. That's why I'm raising my voice, because the microphone is off. At some point, can you hear me? Can I project? So we'll discuss the stability, decision-making, some stats, what our panelists are excited about in the upcoming year, and some predictions. So, starting with Liron. Liron, can you, 60 seconds to 2 minutes, give us an introduction?
Okay, so my name is Liron Avidan. I was born and raised in Tel Aviv, Israel. I've been working for almost 30 years in business, mostly real estate. I'm the CEO of Azorim Development. Azorim considered to be one of Israel's largest development companies, existing over 60 years, public company traded in Tel Aviv, building all over Israel from Nahariya to Beersheba.
Yes, great to be here. Great to see everyone. So I'm Liron. I'm a venture partner at Pitango Growth. Pitango is one of the largest and most veteran Israeli VC venture capital funds. It's been around for over 30 years. We invest in startups in multiple industries, from healthcare to quantum to climate tech to food tech, in multiple stages. So we do from seed to growth. Prior to Pitango, I worked at Facebook. I actually spent 12 years in the US, moved back to Israel a year and a half ago. I hear there's a panel about relocation coming up at some point. If anyone is interested in doing the opposite, relocation and moving back to Israel, I've just experienced it. As a kid, I moved around a lot, so relocation is something that I grew up with and was my norm. I lived in Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, and Japan. So great to be here, great to be talking about the startup industry in Israel.
Hi, my name is Justin Borus. I'm the founder and CEO of IBEX Investors. Does everybody here know what an IBEX is? It's a little goat. If you go to Israel and people are like, oh, do you call it IBEX because it thrives in harsh conditions and it does well in adversity? It's like, no, because it was Freddie Mercury's first band. But anyway, I'm the founder. We manage over $1 billion. We invest everything from seed to IPO and beyond. So our pitch to founders is, hey, we're a one-stop shop for your funding. Instead of going out and raising capital and meeting new investors every 12 or 18 months, you can come to us and we can fund you all the way through. The inspiration was I went to Israel randomly about 12 years ago on a 4-day trip, kind of kicking and screaming, to see the startup nation, because the book had just come out and Warren Buffett had called it his favorite place to invest, and I was just absolutely blown away with what I saw. And I said, how is nobody talking about this? How are there not vehicles to invest other than some VCs that I couldn't have invested in anyway? So that's what we started. We started with $100,000. We're over $1 billion today, and for all those that are thinking, I think definitely Israel's, from the startup standpoint, the best days are ahead of it, and the next 10, 15, 20 years will even be better than what you've seen over the last 10 or 15 years.
So Justin, we're experiencing perhaps the opposite of stability, or at least it feels like. So my question to you is, I'll ask you first, is Israel an island of economic stability, and can you even have economic stability if you don't have political stability, or do you need political stability for economic stability?
Yeah, I would probably, if anyone pitches you anything as an economic stability or guaranteed, or I'd run the other way. But I would say this, fortunes are made in bear markets. They're not made in bull markets. And just to give you a couple of numbers, the Israel public universe, half the Israeli stocks are down over 50% from their highs, and 30% of the universe is down over 70%. Think about that for a second. One VC index we've seen is down 65% just since March. So even though Israel has been this great place to invest for the last 10 or 15 years, one of the best performing stock markets in the world, it's been annihilated in this last bear market. Probably on the private side, it gets worse before it gets better. But of course, that creates opportunity. As far as the politics go, probably been there now over 100 times since we launched this fund, and probably had thousands of meetings at this point. Politics has not come up once in ever a meeting with a startup. So I wouldn't conflate the two. The Silicon Valley of Israel really is independent from what's going on in the politics. I know people are emotional about the politics, but I wouldn't conflate the two when you think of the Silicon Valley of Israel.
I want to hear what our other panelists have to say on that, and I want to come back at some point, Justin, to this notion of legal stability. Investing in Israel versus in India or a China or a Brazil, and if that is impactful at all for you. But Liron, economic stability, island of stability, agree, disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree with, I actually agree fully with everything that Justin said. And I think if you look at, over the years, the Israeli tech industry has continued to thrive despite what has been happening in the political scene. And I think part of this is just the importance of the tech industry in Israel to the success and livelihood of Israel as a country. I mean, if you look at some of the numbers, we have over 400,000 people that are employed in the tech sector, which is about 10% of the labor population. Tech R&D as a percentage of GDP is about 5%. About 50% of our exports are related to tech. So I think there is, kind of the tech sector, and as part of it, the economic sector has kind of transcended a lot of the turmoil that we've seen in the political arena. Now, having said that, all of this will remain true unless there's large changes and reforms that will come, as some are threatening to happen. But as long as those don't happen and we continue to have some level of stability, I agree with Justin, also having lived abroad for so many years, when people talk about the Israeli tech startup scene, politics is not something that they usually talk about.
Unlike what you've just heard, from the real estate point of view, especially development, it's crucial to have stability, because we are so dependent on government, on municipality systems, on reforms that has to be done. And without stability, it's very difficult to develop real estate. Unlike what people might think, if last year only residential prices in Israel increased by 20%, it's not something that developers look for. It's true that it affected our profits, but we look for something more normal, more stable. Now, I think that maybe now it's an opportunity, after we had 6 elections during 2.5 years, maybe now there is going to be a long-lasting government, and this is a prime condition if we expect people, or we expect government to bring a long-term program how to tackle the big problems that the real estate market in Israel suffer from. And so stability from the political point of view is important for the real estate development.
So, anybody in the room that's been involved in real estate development knows that the entitlement process, right, dealing with municipalities can take years. What happens when your government is changing on a day-to-day basis? Can you get the permits? Are you guys stuck in the weeds?
So I'll tell you exactly what happened during the last 3 years. As there was no stability in Jerusalem, the municipalities started to become more and more independent. The mayors spotted the vacuum, and actually each one of them did whatever he wanted to because there was no central government. So the problems that we face, the years it takes to rezone, the years it takes to get a building permit, and so many other problems just became worse. Instead of shortening the time period, it became longer, and therefore the problems that for us developers to create the necessary supply, these problems just grew bigger.
So I want to kind of do a full round. Just I want to go back to these numbers, right? We all discussed before the panel that we wanted everybody to leave the room, not just kind of better understanding from a qualitative perspective, but to walk away with one or two nuggets that are based in numbers and in facts, right? And you were talking about the fact that 50% of publicly traded companies on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange are down 50%. A third are down at least 70%. Is that kind of your northern star for the next year or two? Are those the numbers that are guiding you? And does that mean that it's all about opportunity and blood in the streets? What numbers are driving your decision making?
Yeah, I think it's all on a case-by-case basis. So Israel on the public universe had a lot of IPOs in the last couple of years. There were SPACs, there were IPOs, and then there was the euphoria, the stocks went up. But as always happens, the pendulum swings too far to the other side. So Monday.com might be one of the best companies, if not the best company to ever come from Israel. Went public, went to about $450 a share. It's an enterprise software company. It's doubled its revenues every year for 5 years. It has 90-something% gross margins. Not very interesting at 20 times sales. Then it goes to about $80 a share, down 80-something%. All of a sudden, it's pretty interesting. And that's just an example, and that's happened dozens and dozens of times in the public universe. The private companies take a little bit longer to correct. So it will happen, but it's a little bit of a slow motion train crash. The most desperate companies come to market now and they say, hey, look, we'll do a down round. We just need funding. The higher quality companies tend to be a little bit more resourceful. They can do an internal round, which means their existing investors put in some more money, or maybe they cut their burn. But even those higher quality companies are likely going to have to come to the market for fundraising in the next 6, 12, 18 months. So I always say if you have courage and you have capital, and it's not easy to have both, but if you have both in a bear market, that's where you make multiples on your money. So you can't be a hero, you can't be too quick, but I think at some point in the next 12 months will be one of the best times to invest on the private side in Israel, and certainly the last 25 years.
And again, you're saying on the private side specifically, as opposed to like these companies that have been just eviscerated on the public stream.
Well, right now, since we do both public and private investing, we're over allocated to the public side because we think that'll recover quicker, where the privates could still be on their way down. But in the next 12 to 18 months, we see ourselves potentially pivoting and over allocating to the venture capital, the private companies.
Liron, I mean, the challenge was to come up with a meaningful stat, but as a VC that's based in Israel, I don't know if you want to kind of piggyback off of what Justin's saying. So I'll let you decide which way to take it.
All good. So One of the things that, kind of two stats that I'm really excited about and I think really motivate and drive the work that we do at Pitango are related to the private market, because that's where we're focused. So unicorn status. I'm sure many of you have heard about the unicorn status. It was the status that everyone wanted the past few years. It's private companies that are valued at over $1 billion. Traditionally in Israel, a decade ago, 15 years ago, there were very few companies that would get to that valuation because they were very quick to sell to global strategic acquirers. What has happened over the past 10 years is we've had a lot more companies grow into those valuations, and we have about 100 unicorns based in Israel. A lot of these were formed in 2020, 2021. And it's great to see that Israeli companies both have the resilience and the scale to grow into that. But I think with what we're seeing today in the markets, there's actually a stat that I think is even more important than that, and something that we look at a lot at Pitango. And that's companies that are not valued at over $1 billion, but companies that are creating value. And one of the new stats that we're looking at are what we call centers, or companies that have over $100 million in revenue. And there's over 35 of those companies today based in Israel. And the reason, why we're excited about that is because, as I mentioned earlier, we look at companies from early stage through growth. And at times like this that we're experiencing now with the contraction of the markets, recession, inflation, we're going to see a lot of good companies come out of this. We're going to see a lot of founders and venture capitalists that already have that resilience in order to build those companies systematically and at scale. And I think a few years from now, we'll see more of these companies that are creating value at over $100 million in revenue, $200 million in revenue, come out that have been founded at this time. And we're really excited at Pitango to not only invest in them at the early stages, but really follow them through the growth.
Now, from the real estate point of view, it's first we've experienced a gigantic jump in the interest rate, almost 4%. And after almost a decade in which the market enjoyed 0% interest, it became much more expensive. And this had a strong effect on the demands, a cooling effect via the mortgages. But it's important to understand that it had the negative effect on the supply. I mean, the supply might also decrease now, and we've already saw first signs of smaller numbers of starting of construction. So the good news is that I tend to believe that the increase of interest rates is almost over. Maybe one more, two more by 50 basic points. I would expect the interest rate to remain at this level during 2023, and by mid-24 to start decrease. Now, once this happens, I think that the real estate market in Israel will again boom, because the numbers that the Israeli market face are very strong. The natural demands for new residential units in Israel is 65 to 70,000 units, new units per year. Now, if you add to this a chronic shortage of almost 100,000 units that the Israeli market suffers from, you understand that if we won't start raising the pace to around 80,000 units per year, we won't be able to solve this major problem of supply not being able to match the demands. Now, some of you might know, but fertility rate in Israel right now, 3 kids per woman. By the way, an interesting thing to know that 3.13 comes from the Jewish mother, and 3.01 come from the Muslim mother. Not as many people think. Israeli population is growing by 2% annually. And that is a big difference between Israel and other developed countries in the OECD. By the way, by 2040, Israel is expected to become the highest density country in the OECD. And this will, of course, affect the residential real estate market. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, when growing up in the United States, it was almost, we took for granted that the average family had 2.3 kids, 2.5 kids, and a dog, and the population grows. Now we're at 1.9, and what is it, 2.1% for just to kind of remain stable for population neutrality. Our population is shrinking. Israeli population, we used to look at the Arab sector, we used to look at the Haredi sector. Now everyone's, it's almost like a status symbol, right? To have 3 kids, it's the normal thing.
In the future, what we call Israel 2048, when Israel will celebrate its 100 independence year, by 2048, the population in Israel is expected to reach 15 million people. Now, we're now 9.5. That means that in 2 decades plus, the population in Israel is going to grow by 60%, by over 60%. And this, again, has an enormous effect on the demands for the residential market.
Fascinating. Justin, how active are American investors from your purview, from your perspective?
Yeah, so one of the niches that we try to fill is Americans, for the most part, will fly to Israel once or twice a year, maybe make a one-off investment, and then as soon as an economic downturn comes, they go back to the core and kind of ignore their satellite offices. Where we thought there was a real opportunity was have an actual team in Tel Aviv that could source the investments, and then have a small army in the U.S. that could then bring these companies, open up a U.S. office, hire their sales force, introduce them to investors, customers. What I found, and I'm sure you'll disagree, but what I found is some startups don't want to have an Israeli VC if they can avoid it. It's a little bit like the 2 dogs in the dog park that they can't get along and one has to wear the lampshade. And they don't mind having an American VC, but they don't want an American VC that just is kind of thinking about Israel as an afterthought and is making 2 trips a year. They want somebody, an American VC, but has a real commitment to Israel and as a team in Israel. So that's the niche we were trying to exploit when we founded IBEX.
I'm going to try to stoke some controversy. Liron, what do you think?
We can agree to disagree, but I will say there's enough room for all of us. So I think there's definitely companies that want American VCs. There's ones that feel more comfortable. Israeli VCs, we love to partner with American VCs, so I think there's room on the cap table for all of us. What I will say, though, to answer your question around American investors, and what we've seen is, if you look at kind of 2021, early 2022, about 40% of the mega rounds are like 50 million and above rounds that were done in Israeli private companies came from first-time investors. So folks that had never invested up until that point in Israel, and that was their first time investing. What we see now is that very few of them are coming back. So a lot of them were there kind of enjoying the party, and were there when everything was booming and everything was going well, but their resilience to really stay in the Israeli market while they're focusing maybe on different geographies is challenging. And what we see now is that a lot of that kind of money and dry powder, as we call it, has kind of shifted elsewhere. Luckily, there are enough VCs, whether they're Israeli-based or like IBEX that are fully focused on Israel, that are still investing in the Israeli market. So I think there's more than enough money. But what we're seeing in terms of some of these global and in many cases American investors is that a lot of them now, and kind of in the bear market, have put a pause in investing in private companies in Israel.
Got it. And as we start to wrap up, but I want to touch upon this, Ron, is, you know, this notion still exists in my mind of the French and the Belgians, you know, buying apartments in Israel. How active are Americans from that perspective, and, you know, what does the American unit buyer look like?
So the American buyers have wakened a few years ago, because till then we were mostly dealing, as you said, with the Europeans, French, British. But we see now three kind of American buyers. These are the buyers that are semi-retired or retired and decide to move to Israel. Most of them buy in Jerusalem, in different neighborhoods that they have their community that they are looking for, and they move to Israel, and they have their kids coming to visit them in the Chagim or vacations. We have another kind, which is Americans that do not change their center from America, but they decide that they want to buy an apartment in Israel, and instead of visiting hotels, if they come to Israel 3-4 times a year, they prefer to come to their own place and have their friends coming over, and we see more and more also mostly in Jerusalem. The third group that we face are mainly business people that come to Israel often while conducting business with Israeli companies, and also prefer to come to their own house instead of again and again and again to the Hilton and the Interconti. They tend to buy more in Tel Aviv or the surroundings of Tel Aviv, like Herzliya and Ramat HaSharon and the nearby cities. And definitely we see a growing number of American buyers. I think it has something to do with maybe anti-Semitism in America raising its head, and we expect to meet more and more demands from American clients. One of the reasons, by the way, why Azorim has decided to focus in Jerusalem, and we will have their 20 projects or so.
So, as before we get the hook, last parting thought, you know, one sentence, prediction / guess for the next 12 to 24 months. It can be optimistic, it can be pessimistic, but ideally around, you know, real estate and tech startup. Ron, let's start with you, and we'll finish with Justin.
So I see the near future, the next 12 months, we will experience a slowdown. I explained the reasons, but I think that by mid-2024, we will see the trend changing as I expect the interest rate to gradually decrease, and the market, the real estate market, go back to where it used to be just 12 months ago.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I actually think, I don't think it's going to be easy. I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of difficulties across the board in terms of where the economy, both in Israel and globally, is. But from an investment perspective, I actually am excited about the next 12, 18 months. I think this is going to be a time where we're going to see great companies being formed. There may not be as many of them in the early stages, but the ones that are formed are going to be great. You know, there's all these sentences where diamonds are created under pressure, or the strong get stronger, the weaker get weaker. You take any cliche that you want. I really believe that in early stage investment, we're going to see really amazing companies with incredible founders coming up. In terms of growth, I also think this is going to be a great opportunity for growth investment. I think in a few months, I'd say probably 6 to 9 months, we're going to see some of these companies come out and fundraise. A lot of them either have enough cash and have reduced their burn rate in order to be able to hang them over a little bit longer, or they're getting support from their existing investors, as we're doing in Pitango with our portfolio. But in about 6 to 9 months, I think there's also going to be really incredible opportunities in growth investment. So really excited about what's to come, and really excited to see kind of who the founders and the companies that have the ambition and the confidence, even during these times, to build a company, and excited to work with them.
Justin, final thought.
Oh gosh, a lot of pressure. I would just say, look, you never want to try to bottom tick a bear market. No one can do that. You're never going to do that. But don't overthink it. You have your stocks, you have your bonds, you have your real estate. Probably the best place with a little sliver of your portfolio for the next 10, 15, 20 years, I would look for some Israeli VC. You know, a Pitango has an impeccable reputation. I hope an IBEX is pretty good. There's probably a half a dozen or so others. But when we started 10 years ago, there were 20 multinationals with offices in Israel: Intel, Apple, Facebook. Today, there's over 400, and they're all looking to buy Israeli companies. So the next 10 or 15 years, it's going to be a huge value creation. And if you have the right judgment, which is hard, there should be a lot of money to be made. So don't let the last 12 months or the next 6 months mask the greater opportunity of what's about to come over there.
So somebody once told me fortunes are made in bear markets, right? So be greedy when others are fearful. Be fearful when others are greedy. Stay the course. Follow the numbers.
And just last reference, because I'm remembering the name of this session, Israel, an island of stability. I think that the Israeli economy enters this crisis or slowdown with very strong macroeconomic numbers, and therefore I expect it to suffer less from what might happen in America or Europe, and therefore to recover quite soon.
Thank you, everybody. I could have done this for another few hours, but thank you.